Okay. Thank you very much. I'm sorry not to speak Japanese. Let's start with English. It's a pleasure and an honor for me to be at Tokyo today. This is the first time I visit Japan, and I'm glad to be sharing with you the inauguration of a Congress of such importance for the future of world federalism and the activities of one of the oldest and most active organizations of our movement, you. My name is Fernando Iglesias. I am the son of a Spanish family who migrated to Argentina. And my country is a mixture of Spanish people, indigenous people, Italians, Japanese people, and people from all over the world. Cosmopolitanism is a part of the Argentine history, and it's also a part of my DNA. I'm a writer, I'm a journalist. I wrote my first books on the question of world federalism, even if I ignored the term. My first book was published about 20 years ago, and the name was Republic of Air. And I also wrote other books about globalizing democracy, the case for a world parliament, global modernity, and so on. But I am also active. I'm one of the founding members of Democracia Global, Global Democracy, a small but very active organization in Argentina based on Buenos Aires, which is very active in all the campaigns of the World Federalist movement. Particularly, two of them I'm going to speak to you, the UNPA campaign and the COPLA campaign. Finally, I am also, for the second time in my life, a congressman, a member of the Argentine parliament, and I was elected last year, what a mistake, as the chair of the World Federalist movement, which is an honor to me to be the co-chair of the World Federalist movement together with Mr. John Ashworthy, a former Minister of Foreign Affairs in Canada, who was very active in the creation of the International Criminal Code. I would also like to greet you on behalf of the President of my country, Argentina, the engineer Mauricio Macri. As part of a long history of friendship between our countries, Mr. Abe visited Argentina in 2016, and Mr. Macri visited Japan in 2017. And then Mr. Abe went to Buenos Aires for the G20 in 2018. And Mr. Macri is visiting this year Japan, Osaka, for the same purpose, the G20. So both our first authorities are very active, and this is not just a case, it's an expression of how close are our hearts and our traditions. I will greet you also on behalf of the whole World Federalist movement, which follows with interest the development of these discussions, and of Democracia Global, the small Argentine NGO I belong to. We all, both the World Federalist movement and Democracia Global, we hope to establish a permanent and fruitful bond with you for the benefit of our common values. I hope this is just the start of a close cooperation, collaboration, and friendship between you and our organization. I would also like to thank my dear colleague and member of the World Federalist Movement Executive Committee, Mr. Tadashi Inuzuka, and Ms. Kyoko Kusakabe, the chair. But I want to greet all of you and all the World Federalist Movement Japan members for this kind invitation. Hope that my contribution might compensate, at least partially, for the hospitality and affection with which I have been treated. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. I'm very happy to be here in a personal way. You know, I'm a tango dancer, and one part of the tradition we share is tango dancing. You don't know, but in the times in which tango was not so fashionable and it was almost dying in Argentina, the 50s and the 60s, orchestra and tango dancers came to Japan in order to show their capacities, and they were very successful all over Japan. And this was the opportunity for many of the the best Argentine tango orchestra to survive in a very, very difficult time. So we owe you, because we have still this orchestra and this tradition we share with you. By the way, after this conference, I'm going to visit a close friend of mine, an Austrian writer who I met dancing tango. He came here and he met a Japanese tango dancer. They met and they have children together. They live in Hiroshima. I'm very happy for many reasons to be in this wonderful country, but particularly to meet again my close friend in such a city with such legendary story, Hiroshima. Well, let's go to the issue. National populism is the globally coming tragedy. This is the phrase which presides my Twitter account since 2009. Unfortunately, I was right. This is not a good time for the principles we defend. And you know, Mr. Trump is in town. After the great advances shown by the creation of the International Criminal Code and the strengthening of the European integration, international cooperation and multilateralism, the first steps towards world federalism, are facing serious difficulties. The rise of nationalist and populist leaders in Europe and America, the Brexit, the increase of trade frictions, the shrinking of agreements of arms control, and the consolidation of great powers whose political organization is not democratic at all, configures a fragmented and conflictive global political scenario. However, it is also true that the real alternatives are getting clearer every day. Federalism or nationalism, cooperation or conflict, peace or war. In short, a future shared among all human beings or the resurgence of the worst nightmares from the past. These days are hard, but let me remind you that in June 1941, in the darkest moment of human history, Altiero Spinelli, an Italian man, a Federalist activist imprisoned by fascism in the island of Ventotene, wrote these wise words. The dividing line between progressives and reactionaries no longer coincides with the formal lines of more or less democracy or the pursuit of more or less socialism inside each national state. It falls along a very new line that separates those who conceive the essential goal of politics as being the ancient one, the characteristics of national political power and its conquest, and those who see the main purpose as the creation of a solid international state, who will direct popular forces toward this goal and who, even if they were to win national power, would use it first and foremost as an instrument for achieving international union. What an amazing vision and striking predictive ability. 1941, June. What Spinelli posted in 1941 is the same that from the other side of the gap had just announced John Bolton, National Security Advisor of the Trump administration. The world is divided today between globalists and patriots, that is, federalists or nationalists. This is the true key of the 21st century politics. The challenge to overcome national divisions by developing new regional, international, and global federal institutions and democratizing and empowering the United Nations is the main political task of the 21st century. This vision has been the main contribution of world federalism to humanity and its survival. These are not just words. We federalists, we have been a decisive part of the campaign for the creation of the International Criminal Code, the seat of a truly universal justice, and the support of the European Union and its Parliament, a model of regional political integration whose principles become valid today for the whole world. The ICC and the European Parliament are our past and our present. But let's talk also about our future. As a resolution of the World Federalist Movement Congress has recently established at The Hague, the main purpose of our movement is the building of supranational institutions that consecrate global democracy and the rule of law, whose ultimate goal is a world federation. That is why the Hague Congress identified new campaigns as priorities for a renewed World Federalist movement. First, the creation of a global United Nations Parliamentary Assembly. Second, the creation of a regional Latin American and Caribbean criminal code against transnational organized crime. I would like to talk to you about both of them. The creation of a United Nations Parliamentary Assembly, UNPA, has been pursued for 10 years now by a growing group of NGOs led by the Committee for a Democratic United Nations, no Democracy Without Borders, and its boss, its leader, Andreas Buch. To this day, the campaign for the creation of a United Nations Parliamentary Assembly has obtained the support of 1,552 members of Parliament. I repeat, 1,552 members of Parliament from 122 different countries. It would be excellent if the World Federalist Movement Japan devoted its effort, a part of its effort of course, to encourage the Japanese Diet to issue an official resolution of support to the UNPA campaign to the UNPA creation through its Federalist parliamentary group. Think about it. The UNPA should be the embryo of a world parliament, the nucleus of a democratic and federal global governance, a parliament to represent all humankind, to cope issues as climate change, nuclear proliferation, disruptive technologies, financial crisis. A world parliament to regulate global economy and administrate global common good, as the air, the oceans, the whole planet. A parliament to give a voice to the citizens of the world, a voice and a vote. As the person in charge of the parliamentary group to support the UNPA campaign in the Americas, I have gained the official support of 4 parliaments. The Argentine Senate in 2008. This was the first national parliament in history to adhere to the campaign. The Latin American Parliament in 2008. The Argentine Chamber of Deputies in 2009, and the Mercosur Parliament in 2011. I know it's a very difficult thing to have resolutions from a parliament about this kind of campaigns, which look to the future. But I don't ignore the difficulties. I face them personally, but I am convinced of the importance of the support of Japan to the UNPA campaign as a project, as well as the awareness of the Japanese people have for a peacemaking group in international parliamentary dialogue. I repeat this. International parliamentary dialogue is an instrument for peace. It's a way of replacing war for political communication. Of course, the World Federalist Movement and Democracia Global are willing to help those who would like to undertake this initiative in order to share the expertise we had from promoting this initiative in Latin America. In addition, this is an excellent opportunity to strengthen the ties between Democracia Global, World Federalist Movement, and the WFM-Japan. We are geographically located in the antipodes, but close in affection and friendship. Let me add this. The G20 will meet soon at Osaka. All the seeds of a federal global order do already exist. The G20 is like a collective executive power. The United Nations and its agencies are like its ministers. And the General Assembly is some kind of a world Senate. We have also the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank and the World Trade Organization and so on. So many agencies, none of them is democratic, none of them is a part of a federalist church. This is our challenge for the future, to democratize all this structure, to make it part of a federal structure working together for all humankind. The G20 has also a parliamentary dimension. Think about, we are going to have all these people in a short time at Osaka. And the parliamentary dimension of the G20 is called the P20. The P20 met at Buenos Aires for an initiative of the president of our chamber after years, almost a decade of inactivity. It is vital that this parliamentary dimension of the G20 revitalized. It is vital that the B20 gets an official part of the G20, which is not. It's just a side event. We need to incorporate the parliamentary dimension to the G20 as part of a consultative agenda. When we speak about World Parliament, the UNPA campaign is clearly the most important thing. But we shouldn't be close to other alternatives. And a parliamentary dimension of the G20 could be very important in order to fix many points of the global agenda, particularly those connected to the global economy and global finance, which is a big issue right now. That's why I think any effort by the Japanese parliamentarians on this would be a great help for our movement. The second one, the COPLA, Corte Penal Latinoamericana y del Caribe contra el Crimen Transnacional Organizado. It's Latin American and Caribbean Court against transnational organized crime. I would like to invite you to get to know the campaign, of which I am the director. Nowadays, criminal organizations are transnational, regional and global, but justice is not. They are organized for trafficking drugs, people and weapons, for laundering money coming from the mafia and political corruption regardless of territorial borders. Meanwhile, the forces of justice remain anchored to the national framework developed in the 19th century for a world that no longer exists. Yet, 2 decades ago, the United Nations has adopted the Palermo Convention, of which Japan is a full member since its origin. We need to enforce the Palermo Convention and a concrete institutional level, creating a judicial body that promotes international cooperation and regional integration in the fight against transnational organized crime. The importance of this is paramount. Latin America is inhabited by only 9% of the world's population, but 1/3 of world homicides are committed there. Latin America is the most violent continent of the world, and its 2 biggest countries. Could you please make it third? Yeah. There are a couple of this one, the map. The map is very interesting. Yeah. This is the situation, you know. In Europe, for instance, the number of homicides per year is about 2 people in 100,000. This is in Latin America. Venezuela, 88, I think. Salvador is Jamaica over there, but the most important thing, Brazil is close to 30, and also Mexico is close to this level. Latin America, I was saying, is the most violent continent of the world, and its 2 biggest countries, Mexico and Brazil, are in serious trouble. In Mexico, 34,000 people died last year by homicide. And the number of homicides in Brazil was over 63,000. I repeat, 34,000 for Mexico, 63,000 for Brazil in 1 year, homicides. This is far beyond the level of violence of Syria. And this is why Latin America is our starting point, but not the end of the path. As problems related to organized crime and corruption have reached a global scale, a successful Latin American criminal code could become a precedent in the path towards the creation of a global criminal code against organized crime. Moreover, it could also be a stimulus for the creation of regional codes in other parts of the world, such as Asia. I beg you to consider this possibility, because transnational organized crime is not connected to just to one region, but is getting a global issue. When the roads toward regional integration are temporarily blocked, as it happens in some way in Latin America and in Asia today, the fight against organized crime might become a catalyst able to unblock the situation. Organized crime constitutes a problem with enormous social impact. Making progress in this area is simpler than pursuing more ambitious goals. The establishment of a regional and global rule of law could be the first step to achieve global political unity. At least, our founding fathers thought this way in Montreux, Switzerland, in 1947, when they created the World-Federalist movement under the flag World Peace through World Law. I invite the World-Federalist movement Japan and its members to join the COPLA campaign. We need everything, signatories, declaration, funds, political support coming from all over the world. And those who believe that the idea of a regional criminal code that enforces the Palermo Convention could be applied to Asia have Democracia Global, the World-Federalist movement, and myself at your disposal to share efforts and expertise. Unfortunately, in addition, excuse me the translators, but I want to add something. Unfortunately, my bag was stolen in Rio de Janeiro 2 days ago. So that I have no folders. I have a complete bag of folders for you to share with you about the COPLA campaign. But the thieves are very aware of that, and they stole my bag from my car. But the office here was so kind to print this. This is a short explanation of the COPLA campaign. Then you have the key supporters. You will find the Vice President of Argentina, and the Minister of Justice, Human Rights, Security, the Office, Anti-Corruption Office, and so on. But you will find also Nobel Prize Mario Vargas Llosa, for instance, and Fernando and Anthony Giddens, a British author, and for instance, Antonio Di Pietro, the famous fiscal manipulite in Italy, the prosecutor, and many of the members of the most important political elite all over the world. So please, you have here back the explanation, and you can sign as personal, as individuals, but also you can invite your organization, I mean your club, your syndicate, your city, your country, your organization to join the campaign. We need support, and I think this is a valuable initiative which could be replied all over the world. Okay, let's come back to the general landscape. As I mentioned, the challenges we World Federalists face are huge. At the beginning of this century, the world seems to repeat some patterns that in the beginning of the past century led to the worst years of human history. However, neither the threats nor the challenges are greater than those faced by our founding fathers by the end of the Second World War. The Third World War didn't happen, and it didn't happen because of the United Nations and the European Union, mainly. Well, by 1945, who believed that France and Germany, the old enemies, could come together to an agreement to establish the first successful regional union in history over the ruins of the world? Nobody. Who imagined that the fragile United Nations would be able to prevent a global conflict, regardless of the division between East and West that lasted for almost half a century? Nobody. Yet, it happened. It happened. The Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and the Cold War were overcome without clinging towards an atomic world war. Doctors and scientists were proved to be wrong. The post-war war, characterized by growing peace and the benefits of a liberal democratic order, spread throughout the world. And the benefit of democracy got clearer every day, and they are. And this country, Japan, was an important part of the process, a very important part. But development, democracy, well-being, and human rights have to be urgently spread to 7 billion human beings. To cooperate and be part of the process, world federalists have to find new institutional alternatives to take climate change, nuclear proliferation, disruptive technologies, financial instability, and the issues caused by global migration flows, transnational organized crime, and international terrorism. All these issues are getting global. For that purpose, the World Federalist Movement has decided to create 5 transnational working groups. I repeat, the World Federalist Movement has decided to create 5 transnational working groups devoted to the discussion of these topics and the formulation of a federalist proposal for each one of them. Our transnational working groups are only beginning their work, but that is precisely why we need you to participate in them, considering your expertise or according to your interest. Please join them and be part of the solution. The 5 groups, I repeat, are connected with ecology, climate change, peace, nuclear proliferation, technology, in particularly disruptive technologies, economy, financial stability, and a group of close trouble related to global migrations, transnational organized crime, and international terrorism. These are the 5 groups of interest we are creating, and we hope we can exchange, because, you know, we have experts in all these basic issues all over the world. But one of them is in Argentina, the other one is in Japan, another one is in Italy, and another one is in Africa. And nobody does nothing because they are not connected. The idea is to connect all of them in order to share the experience and to elaborate a concrete proposal. What we, the World Federalist Movement, are going to propose in order to keep peace, in order to preserve the ecosystem, in order to fight against financial instability. We need concrete proposals. We were successful when we contributed to create the International Criminal Code because we were able to convince Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, No Peace Without Justice, and so on, that there was a federalist answer to the problem of human rights all over the world. We need to do the same thing in this field, the field of ecology, economy, technology, and world peace altogether. Please, we are just creating the groups, there are some messages to be exchanged. We need to organize this, but of course, I'm very sure that we count on your expertise in all these fields, and I hope we will have your contributions to the creation and to the evolution of these 5 transnational working groups. Okay. Globalization generates global crisis. Global crises require global solutions. Global solutions can only come from global institutions. Global institutions have to be federal and democratic. That's why world federalism and global democracy cannot be opposed anymore without opposing federalism and democracy in general. These are very short sentences that resume the situation in which we are. Globalization generates global crisis, no doubt. Global crises require global solutions, no doubt. Global solutions can only come from global institutions, and global institutions have to be federal and democratic. Constantly growing technological and economic power require management and control. Digital revolution, artificial intelligence, and globalization of social processes open the doors to paradise, but also those to the hell of climate change, depletion of resources, economic crisis, nuclear destruction, and economic irrelevance of billions of human beings. A technology and an economy of the 21st century are not compatible with the institutional architecture of the 19th century. The global society of knowledge and information calls for a global political framework, representative and democratic at all levels, from the local to the global. That is our common goal. This brings us together regardless of our national origin or language or national political preferences or cultural habits. The United Nations was not created in order to bring us to heaven, but in order to save us from heaven. A certain second Secretary General Dag Hammarskjöld in the 50s. The United Nations was not created in order to bring us to heaven, but in order to save us from heaven. These are extremely relevant words when a constellation of unsolved economic and political tension become relevant in the whole world. We are few, and the task is huge. We lack economic resources, and there is too much to be done. That's why those who are in favor of the political unity of the world have to be united, present, active. That is why those who are in favor of global democracy and world federalism have to be democratic and federalist within our own organizations. World peace through world law. Let's refresh our founding flag. Let's update and expand the rule of law and justice for everyone with a global democratic assembly representing the voices and the interests of all human beings. Let's work together for regional integration all over the world. We are not exactly for a global state, but for a world republic based on the same principles we are there at the national level. Rule of law, democracy, federalism, three values that we seem to adore without hesitation at the national level, but don't exist yet at the global scale. Rule of law, democracy, federalism, all over the world. Let's finish. We are all Hibakushans. We are people who survived almost a century ago to the worst 30 years of human history. But we should not continue to believe in our fate. We need to avoid future disaster by completing the meaningful steps to achieve it through the creation of the United Nations, the European Union, and the International Criminal Court. The time for world federalism and global democracy has come. If we fail, if nationalists, sovereigntists, and tribalists win, there will only be destruction and barbarism. I hope we will be able to face these enormous challenges. I am confident we will be up to the task. Thank you very much and good work.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the speech. では、please stay. We will proceed into the question by audience answer. それでは会場からの質疑応答に移らせていただきたいと思います。大変たくさんのご質問をいただいております。英語、スペイン語、織り交ぜていただいておりますが、まずは、世界連邦運動 WFM について、若者はこれからどういうふうな活動をしていけばよいかアドバイスをください。これは学生さんからいただいております。
Well, thank you very much. This gives me the opportunity to remind one of in my opinion, it's personal opinion because I am a member of Democracia Global, and this was a motion moved by Democracia Global, but was voted by the whole movement. Well, we decided last year in the Hague Congress to rescue the basis of our movement, which is what's the difference between the workforce movement and all the rest of people who are concerned about different aspects of humanity, meaning ecology, human rights, and so on. The difference is we, Federalists, we are institutional builders. We build institutions. We were part of the creation of the United Nations, of the creation of the European Union and the European Parliament, and the creation of the International Criminal Court. So our particular role is campaigning about many things which are really important, but the core of our movement is institutional building. This was emphasized by a concrete resolution by our past Congress at The Hague. So the Congress also identified 4 big different campaigns in this field of institutional building. The first one, the International Criminal Court. As you know, the creation of the International Criminal Court was possible because of the concrete action developed by our movement, particularly by Bill Pace, our executive director, in order to convince Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch and No Peace Without Justice about the importance of creating a concrete institution. As you know, Altiero Spinelli, I mentioned it before, was a central part of the creation of the European Union and particularly the European Parliament as a form of regional democracy. The first form of supranational democracy in the history of humankind. The European Parliament is not still a parliament, it's getting a powerful parliament, but it's an amazing experience. Not just for Europeans, but the European Union is a laboratory of supranational democracy, valid for all the citizens of the world. So the second point is supporting the European Union and the European Parliament and the democratization of the European Union. The third point and the fourth point are related to the two campaigns I mentioned before. I mean, at the global level, the UNPA campaign, the campaign for the creation of a parliamentary assembly inside the United Nations, which could become in future some kind of a world parliament, progressively, starting by consultative functions, but changing into legislative powers. And the fourth one is the COPLA campaign I mentioned about, which is a regional initiative against transnational organized crime in the region in which transnational organized crime is the worst nightmare, is the first, the most important obstacle to the development and to the human rights of Latin American citizens. But this, as I say too, it has to be just the first step toward other regional courts like this, or maybe to a world court, a global court fighting against organized crime and corruption, which are transnational, international, and global. Sorry, and remind that we are just at the beginning, but remind these 5 transnational working groups, which could put in connection an expert on economy here in Japan with another one in Italy, another one in Finland, working together in order to have concrete proposals for the regulation of the global economy and to cope with the financial crisis.
ありがとうございます。それではヨーロッパユニオンのお話も出ましたが、それに関係して東アジア共同体を作るという構想が、アメリカの同盟国である日本が、どういう働きをすればこれを実現すると思われますでしょうか。ちょっと難しいですが。
What a question. Well, I don't know. I would be very superb and it would be wrong. I teach you about what to do here in Asia in order to get regional integration. But I will explain what was our original strategy in Latin America and why it was wrong and why we changed it to another one. So, at the beginning in Latin America, we were trying to copy the European model. And we misunderstood. We thought, well, it's European economic community and then European Union, so it has to be something connected with the economy. Let's put the economy as the engine, as the propulsion of regional integration. But it worked in Europe. Maybe it could work here in Southeast Asia. But it didn't work in Latin America because, you know, it's a very different situation. We don't have such a strong industrial development. Our continent is still like a desert in terms of population, and the connections are very hard and distances are enormous. So we were copying a model for regional integration which was very good for Europe. Maybe it's also very good for South Asia, but it was not working at all in Latin America. We have some examples, you know, the Mercosur and some, but it was basically the process has stopped. So we started to think, well, what was the real European strategy? The real European strategy was the European Community of Carbon and Steel. And this was not connected with the economic development of Europe. This was a strategy of peacekeeping. because carbon and steel were vital for the development of both France and Germany, particularly in Alsace, the provinces between the two countries, and the 1871 war in Russia and France, and the First World War and the Second World War were really connected with the carbon in Alsace. Because if the carbon in Alsace was for France, France was going to be a developed country, and Germany was not. And the contrary way was also true. So, why carbon and steel, we thought? Because this strategy is fixing the strategy of regional integration, this is my advice, in the main problem of the region. And the main problem of Europe was war. And peacekeeping was the right strategy. That's why carbon and steel. Because if you control together France and Germany and Italy and the Netherlands and Luxembourg and Belgium, together managing the carbon and the steel industries, war was completely impossible. So, following this idea, we thought, oh, what's the basic problem here in Latin America? It was not war, it was not anymore military dictatorship, it was organized crime. So we focused on organized crime because this was the main problem for the citizens of Latin America, and they are very sensitive. If we are able to show them that transnational regional institutions are able to cope with the problem better than national ones alone, this is a big contribution for all initiatives connected to regional integration. And this is my advice. Please, first, fix which is the main problem of your region you want to solve through regional integration, and focus in just a single strategy on that problem. I know which is, but for sure you know.
ありがとうございます。次に行きますね。国連議員総会、UNPA、United Nations Parliamentary Assembly の、創設に向けて、国際社会では、こういうことがある。特にアジアで何かあれば教えてください。Especially Asia.
Well, the campaign is ongoing. You can be part of the campaign online, both for UNPA and COPLA. You just enter the web page is unpacampaign.org, and the other one is coalitioncopla.org, and you can just sign and be part of the campaign. The basic thing is, so we need to have support from citizens, from different organizations, and particularly by parliamentarians. We are trying to create a parliamentary assembly, so the vital thing is the adhesion and the contribution and the support by parliamentarians. That's why I think we are going to have a meeting with the Federalist parliamentarian group at the Diet, and I'm going to ask them, to propose them to join the campaign, to have a national parliamentary resolution, and also to contribute to keep the P20 dimension of the G20 meeting. Individuals can contribute to this, and I'm sure that Andreas Hummel, who is the person in charge of the campaign, will be open to suggestion. Of course, you can organize meetings, and there is also a global week of action in favor of World Parliament, which is developed every year. I think it's October. It's a World Week of Action for a World Parliament. We, Democracia Global, have been part from the beginning, And we organize different activities in order to do so. For instance, I used to give lectures at universities and schools and so on. And we are preparing also, Democracy Global is preparing, this is something I didn't want to speak, but if I have a minute, it's a very interesting one. There is a problem with education, you know. We are connecting all the world, we are creating a global economy, a global technology, a global thing, a lot of global things. At the same time, we are teaching our children that the national interest is the first principle globally. And we know where this path leads to. It leads to war. We have this exemplification last century. We don't want to repeat the tragedy because with the means of destruction we have now, this will be the last moment of humanity. So we need to teach our children about the values. Of course, we have to do a lot. We all love our countries, we all love our flag, that's okay. But we need to also to be not only national citizens, we need to be global citizens, world citizens. And we need to teach this at the school, because children are very sensitive about that. They are sensitive about, for instance, ecology, really more sensitive than our generations. But they have to connect the need to keep the ecosphere of Earth with some kind of political power responsible to protect the ecosphere and the planet. I remain a phrase of Carl Sagan. You know Carl Sagan, astrophysics from Canada. He wrote in his wonderful book, Cosmos, I read when I was a child. He wrote, "We all know who speaks for nations, but who speaks for Earth? Who speaks for humankind?" And this is why we need a World Parliament and a United Nations Parliamentary Assembly, in order to represent the interests of all humans all over. And we need to teach this in the school. So we, Democracia Global, are creating, together with the mayor of Buenos Aires and the governor of Buenos Aires, a new program in order to teach global citizenship, and the idea of being not only a national citizen but also a world citizen in schools. We are developing this, and we are developing this in a very innovative idea, which is not passive, not to teach children what they should do, but to invite them to be part of a United Nations Parliamentary Assembly. You, John, and you, I don't know, Michael, no, and you, Frida, you are now members of the United Nations Parliamentary Assembly, and you are worried about what? I'm worried about nuclear proliferation, I'm worried about climate change, I'm worried about the whales, and I'm worried about human rights, or indigenous people, or whatever. Please prepare a law to be delivered by the World Parliament. This is the mechanism that it was used also for the United Nations in order to teach to be not just a world citizen, but an active world citizen able to participate in institutions like World Parliament or United Nations Parliamentary Assembly. This is what we are trying to do. I hope it's okay for giving you some ideas about what to do in order to promote global democracy and world governance within our channel.
ありがとうございます。次々質問が来ておりますので、続けていきたいと思います。民族自決、これ何ですかね、セルフデータミネーションピープルでいいですかね。民族自決が意図されている部分と、あとコミュニティオーナーシップが大切だという部分が言われておりますが、フェデラリストは世界連邦運動家としては主義者としてはどう考えたらよいでしょうか。
very philosophical question. It's very good to speak about it too. Well, you know, we used to think these two elements as in contradiction, no? The rights of the individual and the rights of the community. But think about it. We had empowered individuals when we have empowered societies, and we had modern and fruitful and concrete societies of well-being, since we have empowered citizens, empowered individuals. There is not such a contradiction, because modernity is about connecting these two elements, the individual and the universal. Think about human rights. We have the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, which is some kind of world constitution since 1948. And this is a clear simplification of how the rights of humanity as a whole are directly connected with individual human rights. Human rights are both individual and universal. The real problem, in my opinion, is that in the middle we have a lot of different particular groups which are very strong and which are very rational in some state of humanity, but at some point they are very, very active, and they are the groups who are pushing forward history. And this is very good, this is very rational, but after a while they become irrational and a source of conflict and disgregation. You think about it. Nations are a perfect example of that. The Organization of Nations was a wonderful step forward for humanity in order to overcome the past of feudal and religious war. But now, nations are not anymore only an element of integration, but they are also an element of disruption. And we can say similar things about many other particular groups in between the individual and the universal. I mean feminism, or I mean workers. You know, when workers were moving forward in order to gain rights, etc., this was a very moving step to the future, for the future of humankind, and this was the source of benefits for all the human beings. But when they established a dictatorship of workers, this was a real problem. And the same example is for nations, for religious groups, for sex groups, gender groups, or whatsoever. So we need to keep the balance between these two streams of humanity, which are the individual and the humanity, but we have also to be very careful about these kind of particularistic groups, which are not not everybody, not all the group together, but some members of the group who become extremists of the values of the group, and they consider that the only rights all over the world are the rights of their group. This is a very, very dangerous situation, particularly in the terms of religious extremism. In past it was about classic extremism and so on. I hope to have answered.
Thank you. ではですね、ちょっと話題が変わるんですが、世界連邦の実現や、SDG を実現するためには大きな資金ギャップが存在していますね。ヒュージファンギャップですね。で、これをするために国際連帯税、インターナショナルソリダリティレビー、グローバルタックスの導入が始まりつつあると。で、世界の WFM ではこれをどのような展開をしていけばいいか、 もしくは、今のところ取り組んでおられないのか教えてください。
Well, I hope to have answered this question before. You can support any of the 4 campaigns in favor of International Criminal Court, regional integration in Europe but all over the world, the United Nations Parliamentary Assembly campaign, and COPLA campaign. These are 4 campaigns which are very active, and you will find references through the World Federalist Movement Japan office, and me, and the World Federalist Movement office in New York and The Hague, and also think about connecting with people who have some particular expertise on any of the 5 transnational group issues. You are very welcome to be part.
では次いきますね。ですね、我々この世界連邦を実現していくためにはNGO やさまざまなアクターとコラボレーションしていかないといけないと。我々 NGO の WFM もそうですし、UNPA キャンペーンもそうなんですが、そこでですね、高い志を、同じくする国、ライクマインデッドステートですね、そういう同じ志を持つ国はどこでしょうか。ご意見をお聞かせください。
Countries, you mean countries? Yeah. Please let me add something I forgot before. Of course, I'm not mentioning the activities of the World Federalist Movement Japan because you know better than me. But of course, if you are in favor of Federalist activities, you have a very important organization here, which central goal, because of historical reasons, is peacekeeping. But of course, any contribution made through the or Japanese chapter is welcome and a vital part of our study. About the second question, which is about countries, I don't like too much to think in terms of countries, For instance, what country is the United States? Think about Obama. Obama gave a wonderful speech, one of the most interesting and wonderful speeches in terms of World Federalists during the campaign, the Berlin speech. Please go to Google and find the Obama speech at Berlin, where he speaks in terms of, I'm a citizen of the world, and this is our time, and it's high time to blah, blah, blah. Of course, when you arrive to the power of the most powerful national state in history, this is a difficult accomplishment. We have many examples of that. Federica Mogherini, who is in charge of foreign affairs in the European Union, she was very active. She was part of the Roman chapter of the Movimento Federalista Europeo, I mean the Italian chapter of the World Federalist Movement, and so when I was able to pass a resolution in favor of the NPA at the chamber in Argentina, we organized an activity at the Italian Senate. She and other 10 parliamentarians came, and she was so willing to, she presented a resolution in favor of the NPA campaign at the Italian Chamber of Deputies. It didn't pass, and then she became the boss of foreign affairs of the European Union. And of course, it is a different position. I mean, it's a very difficult that structures of national states are in favor of world federalism, because they tend to perceive the development of international, transnational, regional, and global institutions as the sharing of sovereignty, the loss of power, and so on. So, one of the original ideas about how to create a world federation was about to connect democracies, democratic countries, and then start a league of democratic countries all over the world, something like this. I don't know if this is still a valuable idea, but in these changing times, it's a very difficult question, because I suppose that if the United States are not able, for instance, to sign the International Criminal Court Statute, the Statute of Rome, they are not able to be part, even if they are the origin, the first country in which these two basic principles, meaning democracy and federalism, were conjugated at the beginning. So, I don't know, people from the World Trade Movement in Australia were passed a resolution about the validity of the strategy of putting together democratic countries all over the world in order to create an initial federation, and then this could be an idea. But I don't know if this is the best moment, particularly when we face these kind of things, you know. Then maybe you can convince Obama, but it's very difficult to apply this idea to the country. And after a while you have Trump, which is completely against that. So I think that the best thing is we can do is about reforming and democratizing the United Nations and creating new institutions in order to wait for a better moment in order to promote this kind of initiative. But this is just my idea. I don't know if I am right or wrong.
Time is almost 5 more minutes. Last question.
Last question?
Last question. One more last question.
Well, of course.
じゃあ最後にですね、ここに集まっている皆さんはもう世界連邦に理解を示しておられますが、ここに集まっている皆さんにメッセージを最後に一言伝えていただければと思います。
Wow, yeah. I tried. This is what I was trying to do from the beginning. My message is, these are hard times, of course, but when I feel depressed, or when I think this is very difficult, we have no chances, we have no choices, and things are getting worse, I have two things I used to think about. The first one is a familiar memory. My father was the child of a very poor family. He lost his father when he was 6. And my grandmother put all the children in religious organizations in order to survive. After a while, my father had to leave the school, and at the age of 7, he had to start to work. And his work was he had a tricycle, you know, like a bike with a big cast, and he had to go to a factory, and they put inside the cage some material, particularly the production of this factory, and he had to go with this very hard and heavy kind of bike just by his effort. At 7-8 years, he was 7 years old, through all from Avellaneda, which is the south of Buenos Aires, to the north of Buenos Aires in order to give this material to the factory, to the shops, no? The small shops that sold these elements. And when I feel desperate, I used to think about my father at the age of 7 or 8, just crossing every day, the whole city, what a danger to, in order just to survive. And I used to think also about Antero Spinelli. Think about Spinelli. Spinelli was a young man who he wrote a wonderful memories. He wrote, "I became a communist, not because I was convinced about the benefits of communism, but because I saw that the only party in Italy opposing the fascism was the Communist Party. So I became a communist, a member of the Communist Party. And I started to fight. He started to fight against the fascism. He was imprisoned when he was a young man, still 20. And he was condemned to prison. He went to prison for 10 years. And during all these 10 years, he was asked by the family, please ask Benito Mussolini to forgive you. Just say you were wrong, and the fascism is a very good thing, and you will be out of prison in some weeks, which was the use. And he refused for 10 years. And when he was going to finish his prison, he was expecting to join the family and etc. He was condemned to the Ventotene Island in another regime, different regime, because there was a special mechanism for which Mussolini could just decide that a person was dangerous for the country and the state and put him in isolation in an island. You know, that's stupid that it put all together, all the political direction of democratic parties in Italy together in an island to do nothing but conspiring against fascism. Very good. So, Spinelli went to the island of Ventotene in 1941, June of 1941. He started to think about the problems of war, what was the war about, what was nationalism about, and he wrote this wonderful wonderful manifest, the Manifest for a United Europe, or Manifest of Ventotene, in which there is this amazing phrase about the political division is not anymore about the left and the right, and everything is okay, there are differences, but the basic division is those who are in favor of the unity of humankind and those who are against, the globalists and the patriots, as Walter said. He wrote this in June 1941, think about Europe, in June 1941. It was the darkest moment of the war, you know. The United States were not still in the war. The Soviet Union had an agreement with Hitler, and all Europe was completely captured by the fascism. You know, Hitler and Franco and Mussolini, and he was a prisoner of Mussolini. When I get desperate about the situation, when I feel lonely and when I feel there is no chance, I used to think about Antero Spinelli in the island of Ventotene, writing his manifest in complete solitude. And he was right. He was right because the European Union was almost many episodes, but it was reality, and the fascism was defeated. And this is what we should think about, that the challenge are enormous, and this is a very difficult moment in which national populism seems to have the right. But at the same time, there are many interesting developments. You know, think about the Brexit. Think about the Brexit. What the lessons that the Brexit are given to all Europeans about the risk of getting along and divided. And this, I think that humanity has been always capable of surviving and to find a new path. So my message is keep trying. This is our job, our work is a small part of reality, but it's a decisive part of reality. Because we warfarists, we have never been a big organization with maybe at the end of the Second World War, but this was not our strength. Our strength was to be able to keep the thing going on. And Spinelli wrote something about this, which is very interesting to my last comment. He wrote, the validity of an idea is not based in the capacity of reaching in a short time the goal. The validity of an idea is based on the capacity of, after a defeat, to rise up and continue to fight for it. And this is my message to you. Let's do it. We are together. We are few, but we are also right. Think about David and Goliath. David won, and we will. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Round of applause.